Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we are going to do something a little different.
A lot different, maybe?
Yeah, usually we're looking at nonfiction, biographies, scientific studies, that kind of thing. But today we're stepping into a space that, well, it requires you to stretch your imagination a little bit.
For sure. We're looking at a really singular piece of writing. It's a fictional, lost manuscript called Confrontation with Death in the Aperture.
By Max and Claude. And honestly, fictional might be too small a word for it.
I agree. It's more like a philosophical thought experiment, but it's wrapped in a ghost story.
Yeah.
The premise is just fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
It imagines the afterlife of the legendary Egyptian feminist writer and psychiatrist Nawal El Saadawi.
Right, Nawal El Saadawi. She passed away in 2021. And for anyone who followed her work, she was a titan.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, we're talking about a woman who wrote dozens of books, was imprisoned by Sadat, was exiled. She spent essentially 80 years fighting patriarchy, religious fundamentalism, and oppression with a capital O.
She was a force of nature, just fierce, angry, and completely uncompromising. She was an expert, really, at diagnosing the disease of oppression.
Exactly. And that's what makes this manuscript so interesting. It takes this woman, this ultimate warrior, the ultimate diagnoser of trauma, and it drops her into a setting where fighting just doesn't work anymore. The text calls it the aperture.
The aperture. I love that name. It's described as this liminal space.
So not heaven or hell.
Definitely not. It's this seed place of consciousness where time just collapses. One of the characters, Zainab, she calls it the space between living and dying, or waking and sleeping, is where consciousness goes to observe itself.
So, okay, imagine Nawal arriving there. She's fresh off a lifetime of battle. She's probably looking for a pen, right? Looking for a podium, ready to write another manifesto.
And instead, she hits a wall.
Yeah.
A total wall.
Yeah.
The conflict is immediate. The other women in the aperture basically tell her stop. They challenge her. They say, look, you are brilliant at naming the pathology, neurosis, dissociation, the mechanisms of control, all of it.
Oh, she's a psychiatrist after all.
Right. But they tell her she doesn't know how to write about healing.
Wow, that's a heavy critique. It's like telling a doctor, you're great at finding the tumor, but you have no idea how to help the patient live after the surgery.
Precisely. They say she knows the language of wounds, but she never learned the language of wholeness.
And that is really the mission of this deep dive. We're going to unpack how this text reimagines resistance. Because the argument here is that fighting against something, it's not enough.
It can't be the whole story.
Right. If you spend your whole life fighting the darkness, you might forget what the light actually looks like. You have to do the messy, difficult work of building joy and pleasure, even while the world is still broken.
It's a shift from wound consciousness to wholeness consciousness. And for Nawal in this text, that lesson starts with a character named Zainab.
Okay, so Zainab isn't just a random spirit, right? She's based on someone Nawal actually knew.
Yeah. In the text, Zainab is a woman Nawal met in prison. In real life, Nawal was imprisoned in 1981. And Zainab was a young woman who was arrested for inciting debauchery.
Which, let's be clear, in that context usually meant she reported a rape or said no to a powerful man.
Exactly. And in the aperture, Zainab acts as Nawal's guide. And she does not treat her like a celebrity. She questions Nawal's reliance on rage.
I think for a lot of activists, rage is the fuel. It's what gets you up in the morning when everything is terrible. So for Zainab to question that, what is she saying? That Nawal shouldn't have been angry.
No, not that she shouldn't have been angry, but that she got stuck there. There's this really powerful moment where Nawal admits that as a psychiatrist, the DSM, the Manual for Mental Disorders, it has 1,000 entries for how the mind breaks.
Schizophrenia, depression, PTSD.
All of it. But it has no entry for joy. It has no clinical definition for a soul that is whole.
That's wild when you think about it. We have this huge vocabulary for pain, but we stutter when we talk about happiness.
We do. Patriarchy teaches us the language of wounds. And if you only speak that language, you remain defined by the thing that hurts you. So in the aperture, Nawal is confronted with an alternate version of herself.
The gardener Nawal.
Yes.
I loved this visual. It's Nawal, but instead of holding a pen or a scalpel, she's just covered in dirt. She prioritized gardening, painting, music. She allowed herself to be just happy.
And the real Nawal, the famous writer, is so skeptical of this, incredibly skeptical. She looks at Gardener Nawal and thinks, you're a dilettante. You're selfish. How can you be painting and gardening when women are dying in the streets?
It's the guilt of the activist, right? If I'm resting, the bad guys are winning.
Which brings us to the tomato scene.
Okay, let's talk about the tomato. Because on the surface, this sounds a little trivial.
It seems trivial, but it's the turning point.
Mm.
The gardener Nawal hands the writer Nawal a tomato, fresh from the vine, and she asks her a question that just stops her cold.
What's the question?
When was the last time you ate something just because it tasted good? Not because it was healthy, not because it was fair trade or politically sourced, but just because it was delicious.
And let me guess, Nawal can't remember.
She can't. Her entire life has been functional. Food was fuel for the fight. Every single choice was political.
You know, I feel that. I think a lot of us feel that pressure today to make every single consumption choice ethical. It's exhausting.
It is. And the text argues that if your revolution is joyless, if it's just noble suffering and self-denial, it's not sustainable. And more importantly, it reinforces the idea that women's lives are meant to be hard.
Right. If you make freedom look miserable, why would anyone want it?
Exactly. Why would they want to be free? So the tomato it's proof of life. It's the argument that a revolution must taste good. You have to experience the sensory joy of the world you're fighting for. Otherwise, you're just fighting for a different kind of prison.
This leads perfectly into one of the core concepts the manuscript introduces: desires beyond survival. Can we break that down? Because survival feels like the baseline goal for a lot of people in these situations.
It is the baseline. But if you stop there, you're still letting the oppressor define your boundaries. Desires beyond survival is the shift from defining yourself by what you are fighting against, which is reactive.
To what you are for?
Yes, it's affirmative. And the text introduces a character here to illustrate this, the Nigerian woman's grandmother.
And this character is vital.
So vital. Because on paper, if you just looked at her bio, her life was total structural oppression. Child marriage, no education, 11 kids living under a patriarchal system. By all accounts, she should be a tragedy.
She should be a statistic.
But the text flips that narrative completely.
Yeah.
It says she was the funniest person her granddaughter ever knew. She told dirty jokes, she sang, she laughed all the time.
I love the line where she says, "If I spent my life being angry about what I couldn't change, I would have had no life at all."
That's the key. She taught that keeping your inner life free, specifically through laughter and dancing, is a form of resistance when political resistance isn't possible. It's refusing to let the oppression steal your joy.
It's saying, you can control my laws and my money, but you cannot stop me from finding this joke funny.
Precisely.
That makes sense internally, but how does it translate to the outside world? Because you can be laughing inside while still being oppressed. Is the text saying we should just joke our way through tyranny?
No, and that's a crucial distinction. It's not about passivity. It leads to what the text calls embodied politics. There's a scene where Nawal, who is very stiff, very intellectual, is invited to join a circle of women dancing. And it's emphasized that they aren't dancing for men.
Right, it's not a show.
Not at all. It's the body claiming its own aliveness. The text makes a really interesting point here. Embodiment precedes politics. You have to feel free in your body. You have to feel that your body belongs to you and is capable of joy before you can effectively demand freedom in the law.
If you don't own your body, how can you fight for your rights?
Exactly. And that connects to the next part, which I think is the emotional anchor of the whole manuscript. Nawal is in the Aperture learning all this, and Zainab tells her she needs to write a story. But not a manifesto. A story about a woman named Amira.
This is the book within a book.
Yeah. And Amir is the opposite of Nawal. Nawal was elite, educated, a doctor. Amir is nobody important. She's uneducated, living in a village, and she underwent FGM at age 7, married off at 16.
So she's living a very typical life for a woman of her background in Cairo. But then 2011 happens, the Arab Spring, Tahrir Square.
And this is crucial. Amir goes to Tahrir not because she understands the politics. She doesn't know about Mubarak or the Constitution. She goes because a neighbor invites her.
And what hooks her isn't the speeches.
No. It's seeing her daughter.
Her daughter is there.
Her daughter's in the square, dancing, taking up space, being loud.
Yeah.
And seeing her daughter's body moving so freely in public, that cracks something open in Amira. It's that embodied politics again.
But here's where the text gets really nuanced and honestly a bit heartbreaking. Because we all know what happened after 2011. The revolution didn't result in a utopia.
No. The text is very realistic about the failure. The regime changes, oppression returns, the economy tanks. Amira is still poor. She struggles to pay rent.
There is no Hollywood ending where she becomes a senator.
None.
So was her awakening pointless?
That's the question the text asks, and it answers no. The political revolution failed, but the cultural revolution continued inside Amira. She leaves her abusive husband. She learns to read. She builds a life, her own life on her own terms.
And then we get what might be the most radical scene in the whole manuscript, the bath scene.
Yes, this scene
Yeah.
requires you to slow down. Amiri is in her 30s. She's alone. She's in a bath. And she starts to explore her own body.
And we have to remember, this is a woman who has lived her entire life with the belief that her pleasure was physically cut out of her, that it was stolen when she was 7.
Exactly. She believes she is broken. But in the water, she discovers that her body is still capable of sensation. It's not the explosive pleasure she imagined intact women have, but it's a quiet, sustainable warmth. She discovers that nerves branch and connect in ways the men who cut her never understood.
There's a line there that just hit me in the chest. It was not what had been stolen, but it was not nothing.
That is the core of the argument. It's devastating and hopeful at the same time. The text frames this not as healing, because healing implies returning to a pre-wounded state, and she can't get that back.
Right.
It frames it as adaptation or creation. She is building something new from the ruins.
It's so profound because it acknowledges the trauma without letting the trauma have the final word. She isn't fixed, but she is reclaiming the territory of her own body.
Precisely. It's a refusal to be defined solely by the absence.
Speaking of trauma having the final word, the manuscript takes a really interesting turn here. It jumps into the future to deal with intergenerational trauma. We meet Salma's granddaughter in a future Cairo.
Right. In this future, FGM is illegal, and the law is actually enforced. So physically, the cutting has stopped. The girls are intact.
So, problem solved.
You'd think so.
Mm-hmm.
But the text introduces this concept of double inheritance. Even though the physical cutting stopped, the trauma was passed down.
Okay, wait. How does that manifest? If the daughter is fine physically, why is there trauma?
Because the mothers who are cut, they project their own fear and shame onto the daughters who weren't. They treat the daughters' bodies as dangerous or vulnerable. They pass down the flinch, even if there is no knife.
Wow, so the daughter inherits the anxiety of the wound without the wound itself.
Exactly.
Well.
It's not just about the physical act. It's about the energetic imprint. And the text doesn't let Nawal off the hook with her own imprints either. There's a scene where a queer Palestinian woman confronts Nawal.
This felt like a real moment of accountability. Nawal El Saadawi was a hero, but she wasn't perfect.
No, she wasn't. Like many feminists of her specific generation and background, she had some blind spots, especially around heteronormativity. She historically framed lesbianism as a reaction to patriarchy.
Like, women were choosing women just to escape men.
Exactly, rather than accepting it as a natural, innate orientation.
And in the Aperture, she has to own that.
She does. She has to admit her vision of liberation was limited. She viewed everything through the lens of the war against men, so she couldn't see love that had nothing to do with men.
And then we get the father. Noel's father appears. This is complicated. He apologizes for not stopping the cutting when she was a child. He says he loved her, but he prioritized tradition.
It's that classic apology. I was just following the rules. Nawal accepts it, but the text notes something very important. He cannot repair the harm.
Say more about that, because usually we think the apology is the repair.
The text argues that remorse is not repair. He can be sorry, but he can't give her back what was taken. The repair is Nawal's to do. It's a harsh truth. The people who broke us cannot fix us. We have to build the wholeness ourselves.
That leads us to the central metaphor that really ties all of this together. The manuscript calls it the revolution that plants.
This is the synthesis. It's contrasted with a revolution that burns. A revolution that burns is fast, right? It's dramatic. It's toppling a statue, storming a palace. It feels satisfying because you see the result immediately.
But a revolution that plants, that sounds slow.
It's agonizingly slow. It involves planting seeds, whether that's ideas, art, gardens, raising children differently, that you might not live to see harvest.
That's a hard sell for an activist who wants justice now. Hey, plant this seed, and your great-granddaughter might enjoy the shade.
It is a hard sell. But the gardener Nawal argues, if we only document what they destroy, we never build what they can't. If you burn down the palace but you don't know how to grow food, you'll just starve in the ruins.
There's a meta layer to this too, right? The manuscript ends with a reveal about who is actually writing it.
Yes. Nawal realizes that this book she is writing in the afterlife is actually being received as a dream by a young writer in the living world.
Salma's granddaughter.
Salma's granddaughter. So the Aperture is kind of like a broadcast station. It shows how ideas propagate through the collective consciousness. Nawal plants the seed, and a young woman in Cairo wakes up and starts writing, thinking it's her own idea.
It blurs the line between individual authorship and collective wisdom.
Yeah. It suggests we aren't alone in our heads. We're part of this massive, invisible relay race.
That's actually a really hopeful image, that the work isn't lost when the worker dies.
Exactly.
So, trying to pull all this together, the text isn't saying we should ignore oppression. It's not preaching some kind of toxic positivity.
No, definitely not. It's advocating for wholeness consciousness, the ability to hold both the rage and injustice and the capacity for joy simultaneously. You don't have to wait for the world to be fixed before you allow yourself to live.
The final image of the manuscript is just Nawal resting,
Just resting. In a garden. Stopping the work.
which for a woman who worked for 80 years is probably the most radical thing she could possibly do.
It is. It's the ultimate refusal to be a machine for the cause. She finally puts the burden down.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into confrontation with death in the aperture, we want to leave you with the provocative question the text poses. It asks us to consider, what are the seeds you are planting in your own life that might not flower until after you are gone?
And maybe more challengingly, are you allowing yourself freedom practices, joy, rest, pleasure right now? Or are you waiting for the world to be perfect first? Because the text warns us, if you're waiting for the world to be perfect, you might be waiting forever.
The revolution has to taste good.
It has to taste good.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll catch you in the next one.